I caught my cheating wife on Nanny Cam with her affair partner and took immediate revenge to heal. John Anderson was a man of routine. Since college, life had been predictable, especially after meeting Amy, a fellow student passionate about art. They quickly bonded over shared goals, though their paths diverged. John started a small printing shop in Elmville, while Amy pursued her art. Despite different interests, their marriage seemed strong, and they supported each other as they built a life together. Their happiness peaked with the birth of their daughter, Amanda, who became their world. However, as time passed, subtle changes crept into their relationship. Conversations grew shorter, and the connection they once had began to fray. John noticed but was too busy to address it until Amy's distant behavior became impossible to ignore. In recent months, sitting at his desk, John pondered what to do. His wife of 6 years had been acting differently since Christmas, seeming preoccupied and distant. Their once meaningful conversations had dwindled to brief exchanges, and Amy's repeated claim of nothing being wrong frustrated him. Determined, he planned to confront her again that night. The growing distance affected their intimate life, once active, but now reduced to almost nothing. Amy had been taking evening art classes for the past 5 months, and John noticed they were lasting longer. On other nights, she would work on her paintings for hours, while John cared for Amanda. During these times, he began to wonder if something more was going on. Twice, he checked up on Amy at the university but found nothing suspicious. She was always where she said she'd be, working on her art. As John sat there, unsure how to fix something he couldn't even confirm was broken, his new assistant, Mary, approached him and said, "John, Amy's on the phone." Mary, a recent hire, had quickly proven her worth by efficiently managing customer service and administrative tasks, freeing John to focus on running the business. With the post-Christmas slowdown coming to an end, he appreciated her skills even more. John picked up the phone and greeted, "Hi dear, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, John," Amy replied. "I just want to know if you'll be home at your usual time tonight." "Yes, I should be," John assured her. "Mary has things under control here." "Good," Amy said. "I need to talk to you. I'll see you at 5:15. Goodbye." "Goodbye, love you," John replied, but she had already hung up. He stared at the phone, troubled by how quickly she'd ended the call. Just a few months ago, they would have chatted and teased each other over the phone, but now she seemed distant. John picked up a photo on his desk from their vacation last year in Florida. They were on the beach, smiling with their arms around each other. He remembered how good their first 5 years of marriage had been, filled with trips and romance. Their once frequent lovemaking had dwindled, and he couldn't understand why. He hoped to get answers tonight. The ringing phone pulled John from his thoughts. He answered and returned to work, deciding to deal with his problems with Amy later. Just before closing time, Mary and Frank, his only other employee, entered his office. Mary informed him of a rush job that needed to be finished by morning, but John couldn't stay late. Frank reluctantly agreed to work overtime. John quickly packed up, eager to talk to Amy. He left the office and arrived home early. Entering the kitchen, he found Amy staring out the window. When he greeted her and tried to kiss her, she turned away and said, "Please, John, don't. I need to talk to you." Confused, John followed Amy into the living room. She sat down and after a moment said, "John, I'm leaving you. No, I'm divorcing you." Stunned, John asked, "What? How can you say that?" Amy explained that while taking her art course, she realized she had fallen in love with Peter, her professor. She felt they were better suited for each other, sharing more interests. Peter was leaving for Paris at the end of the semester, and she wanted to go with him as his wife. She needed the divorce finalized by then. "You're talking about Peter Bridges, your professor?" John asked in disbelief. Amy nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "Yes, John, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen, but it has." John sat in silence, his mind racing through the years he'd spent with Amy, the love they shared, and the future he had envisioned. He wanted to argue, plead, or make her see reason, but deep down, he knew nothing would change her mind. The woman he loved was gone, replaced by someone he barely recognized. Amy stood up slowly. "I'll have my lawyer send the papers on Monday. I'm leaving now. Amanda is with my parents, and they'll bring her home at 7. John wiped his eyes and followed her to the front hall. He watched as she picked up her suitcases and walked out the door. At the bottom of the stairs, Peter Bridges approached, took one of the suitcases and gave John a smug look. Amy didn't look back as they drove away. John closed the door, tears falling as he sat back on the sofa, replaying the evening's events in his mind. Time slipped away until the doorbell rang. For a brief moment, he hoped it was Amy returning, but it was her father, Fred Holmes, who walked in. "I see she told you," Fred said, disappointed. "I can't believe she fell for that guy." Fred's wife June and their daughter Barbara followed, carrying Amanda and her things. The family's somber expressions showed they had been crying. Amanda, however, remained cheerful, unaware of the pain around her. John stood, and they all hugged him, offering comfort. With no siblings and his parents gone, the Holmes family was all he had. They sat together, discussing what had happened. No one could believe it. Tears were shed again as they shared their disbelief. Around 7:30, June suggested finding something to eat, and she and Fred went to the kitchen to prepare sandwiches. Barbara handed Amanda to John, who let his daughter play in his lap even as she tugged at his hair. Despite the sadness, Amanda's laughter brought a moment of relief. Soon they all gathered around the coffee table to eat. John wasn't hungry but ate anyway, appreciating the company. As they ate, he observed the Holmes family, Fred and June, both retired and active, and Barbara, a 16-year-old with braces and a quiet smile. After the meal, Amanda entertained everyone by standing at the coffee table and trying to grab plates, her playful antics lifting their spirits. By 8:30, Barbara volunteered to get Amanda ready for bed, while John, Fred, and June discussed the logistics of balancing work and childcare. They decided John would need daycare, but June offered to help in the meantime. John planned to take the next day off to handle things. Barbara returned, reporting Amanda was asleep. John thanked her for her help. After more conversation, the Holmes family decided to leave. John expressed his gratitude and locked the door behind them. He checked on Amanda, who was sound asleep, then poured himself a stiff drink to calm his nerves. As he sipped his scotch, anger replaced his earlier sorrow. Amy had shattered his world, and he vowed not to make things easy for her. John went upstairs to the master bedroom and turned on the light. It was the first time he'd been there since Amy left, and he noticed the empty closet and bare makeup dresser. The attached bathroom was also devoid of her things. He turned off the light and collapsed on the bed, tears returning as he felt the emptiness inside. Amy was gone, and though he doubted he could win her back, he felt he had to try. Eventually, the scotch took effect, and he fell into a restless sleep, still dressed. He woke early, took a hot shower, and went through his morning routine, though the thought of living without Amy weighed heavily on him. After checking on Amanda, still asleep with her teddy bear, he kissed her cheek and went downstairs to prepare breakfast. He made coffee, found cereal for both himself and Amanda, and forced himself to eat, despite having no appetite. His thoughts remained on Amy, but he knew he needed to focus. John brought out his briefcase and did some work at the kitchen table until he heard Amanda waking. After changing and dressing her, he fed her breakfast. When Amanda realized it was her father feeding her and not Amy, she began to cry, and John struggled to calm her. Eventually, he distracted her with a toy and she settled down. He called the office and left a message for Mary to contact him. When she called back, he explained he'd be working from home for most of the day but would stop by later. He didn't mention what had happened. Soon after, June arrived to care for Amanda while John finished his work. By 10 o'clock, he joined June and Amanda in the living room. June noticed John's exhaustion and commented on it. John admitted he'd slept poorly, aided only by scotch, but resolved to get through this for Amanda's sake. He even confessed he might take Amy back for Amanda's benefit, though he suspected Amy had already moved on. June hesitated before revealing that Amy had told her she'd been physically engaged with Peter over the last 2 weeks, which was why she distanced herself from John. However, she reassured John that Amy had said he was the more considerate lover, and her decision wasn't based on sexual dissatisfaction. John appreciated the clarification but doubted Amy would change her mind. Deciding to distract himself with work, John headed to the office, determined not to let his business fail. He kissed Amanda, who proudly stood by the sofa and waved goodbye, just as he had many times before. He reminded himself that his priority was ensuring Amanda came through this situation unscathed. At the office, Mary was busy on the phone, so John went straight to his desk, needing time to compose himself after the emotional drive. Once settled, he handed Mary the files he'd completed at home. Noticing her concerned look, he decided it was time to explain the situation to her. When Mary entered his office, John asked her to close the door and sit down. It was difficult for him, but he eventually said, "Mary, I'm dealing with a serious situation at home. My wife left me last night, but she didn't take our daughter. I've become a single parent. You've been here only 2 weeks, but you've shown great competence. I'd like to make you my office manager, with a $1.50 raise for now. We can review how things are going in a month." Mary was surprised but accepted the offer. She assured John she was up for the task, especially with the extra pay. John expressed his confidence in her abilities, explaining that he needed her help as he juggled work and caring for Amanda. Afterward, he shared the news with Frank, who offered his support. John worked until mid-afternoon before heading home with files to finish. He asked Mary to call him if any issues arose, assuring her that he trusted her decisions. At home, June told John that Amanda had fussed for her mother at lunch, but she eventually calmed down. John set up his den to work, realizing he needed better equipment for working from home. The afternoon passed quickly, and by 4:30 he wrapped up work. June, who had started dinner, mentioned she had a commitment over the weekend and suggested Barbara help with Amanda. John agreed, appreciating Barbara's help. After June left, John fed Amanda, who cried for her mother again, but he managed to distract her. The evening was quiet, and after Amanda's bath and bedtime, John poured a scotch and sat, reflecting on Amy. It was midnight before he went to bed. On Monday, February 4th, John woke early and reflected on the weekend. Barbara had arrived on Saturday and took charge of caring for Amanda, allowing John to focus on upgrading his den into a functional office. By Sunday noon, his office setup was complete, and he spent the rest of the day with Amanda and Barbara at the park. Although Amanda had a few tantrums, Barbara managed to soothe her, keeping her occupied. June picked up Barbara on Sunday evening, promising to return Monday morning. She arrived at 8:30, and John headed to the office. The morning was busy until Mary brought in a courier envelope from a law firm. She handed it to John with a concerned look. John hesitated before opening it, finding papers reflecting the terms Amy had agreed to, including arrangements for her time with Amanda. John placed the papers in his briefcase, knowing he needed to contact his lawyer but lacking the energy. He already dreaded Wednesday, when he would see Amy again, fearing it would feel like losing her all over again. The rest of Monday and Tuesday flew by, but Wednesday morning, John woke up earlier than usual, wanting to leave as soon as Amy arrived. When the doorbell rang at 8:30, he braced himself. Amy was facing the street when he opened the door, so he simply said, "Come in. Amanda's still asleep. I'll be going now." He grabbed his briefcase from the kitchen and left through the side door, relieved to avoid a conversation with her, fearing he might break down. Wednesday felt like the longest day of John's life, with his thoughts consumed by Amy's presence at home. By the time he returned, the emotional pain had resurfaced. Twice, he nearly broke down in tears, wondering if he should consider counseling for depression. At 4:30, he called the house and told Amy, "I'll be home around 5 o'clock. Please leave by the front door when I come in through the side. I can't face you today." Amy agreed with a simple, "All right." When John got home, he heard Amy leaving through the front door as he entered through the side. He saw her drive away without looking back. Supper didn't go well. John couldn't eat, and Amanda, after finishing her meal, began crying for her mother. Nothing seemed to console her, and she cried so hard she struggled to catch her breath. John, deeply upset, finally calmed her down, gave her a bath, and put her to bed, staying with her until she fell asleep. That night, John repeated his ritual of a scotch and deep thinking, staying up until 1:30. He decided he had to act. For both his and Amanda's sake, he would contact his lawyer. Thursday morning, John called his lawyer and scheduled an afternoon appointment at 2 o'clock. He handed his lawyer, Bob Taylor, the papers from Amy's lawyer. After reviewing them, Bob noted that Amy's terms were unusually favorable, with no demands for personal or child support. John agreed but insisted on changes. He wanted Amy to give up all parental rights, avoid any contact with Amanda or him, and sign a legally binding agreement to stay at least 500 feet away. He made it clear that if Amy didn't agree, he would fight the divorce. Bob was skeptical but agreed to draft the letter, cautioning John that Amy might not accept these terms. John returned to work, feeling better now that his demands were in motion. He heard nothing more that week and decided to repeat the weekend arrangement with Barbara, which had gone well. Barbara agreed, and they spent another good weekend together. This time, she brought homework, and John helped her with geometry and algebra while Amanda napped, which she considered a fair trade for her babysitting. On Tuesday, February 12th, John's week began with the new routine he'd established. He worked from home, connecting to the office through his new computer setup. Mary managed the office well, rarely needing his input. The business pace had picked up and all 3 employees stayed busy. Just before noon, John received a call from his lawyer, Bob Taylor, asking him to come in for a 2 p.m. meeting. When John arrived, Bob smiled and said, "I don't know how you did it, but Amy agreed to all your terms. I've never seen a divorce settled so quickly with such serious conditions. Her lawyer will send the signed documents later today. Once you sign, we'll forward your copies." John was shocked but relieved. After signing, he left the office early, telling Mary he would work from home for the rest of the day and possibly the week. Working from home went smoothly on Tuesday, but the next few days were challenging. John tried managing both work and caring for Amanda on his own, but the demands of parenting often interrupted his work. By Friday evening, after putting Amanda to bed, John poured a scotch and realized he needed a better plan. The solution came to him easily. He decided to visit his in-laws over the weekend to discuss his idea. After breakfast on Saturday, he called June, and they arranged a visit at 2 p.m. She also invited them to stay for dinner, which John gladly accepted. When they arrived, Barbara immediately took charge of Amanda, which fit perfectly with John's plan. He joined Fred and June in the living room and shared the recent events, including Amy giving up her parental rights. Both were shocked but understood John's reasoning. John then proposed his idea, having Barbara move in and help care for Amanda after school, allowing him to work at the office in the evenings. He explained that his growing business needed his attention, and Barbara could be compensated for her help. This arrangement would also allow Fred and June the freedom to travel. He emphasized that they should discuss it with Barbara and decide soon. June agreed that it was a promising idea and suggested they discuss it with Barbara after dinner and give John an answer the next day. They all agreed, and the topic wasn't brought up again during the visit. After a pleasant evening, John and Amanda returned home, spending a quiet Saturday night together. On Sunday morning, John received the expected call from June. She told him that Barbara was excited about the idea, and both she and Fred agreed it could work. Since there was some time pressure, Fred offered to come over that afternoon to help set up Barbara's room. When Fred arrived, John showed him the house layout. The master bedroom and bath were on the right at the top of the stairs, with Amy's former studio on the left. Amanda's room and the main bathroom were next, and at the end of the hall was the guest bedroom. John and Fred cleared out the guest room, removing unneeded items to make space for Barbara's things. They decided to put Barbara's computer desk, bookshelf, and study desk in Amy's old studio. Fred offered to buy a rug, blinds, and curtains for Barbara's spaces, since John would be busy with work and Amanda. They also planned to add child-proof gates to the stairs. On Monday, February 18th, John called Mary to let her know she should contact him on his cell for any emergencies. He also instructed her to leave any evening printing jobs for him, as long as Frank had other work. The day went smoothly, with only 2 brief calls from Mary. At 3 p.m., Fred, June, and Barbara arrived with enough of Barbara's belongings for a 2-week stay. They helped set up her room and settled in. John thanked them, kissed Amanda goodbye, and headed to the office. Once there, he called a meeting with Frank and Mary to explain his new schedule. John outlined that he would arrive around 3 p.m., handle calls and meetings during business hours, and work on files and printing after 5 p.m., aiming to reduce Frank's overtime. Frank and Mary saw no issues with the plan, and they continued their work. John worked through the files, took a break for a sandwich, and completed 2 small printing jobs. By 9 p.m., he finished and decided to head home early to check on Barbara. At home, the house was quiet. He found Barbara working in her study room, surrounded by school books. She was in her pajamas, focused on her homework. John asked how things were going, and Barbara mentioned Amanda had been a bit fussy but otherwise fine. She also asked for help with her math homework, which John gladly provided. After freshening up, as they worked together, John noticed Barbara was more comfortable around him, smiling more easily, though she still blushed when their hands accidentally touched. Their relationship had grown stronger. The rest of the week went smoothly. John and Barbara established routines. John prepared breakfast, Barbara packed lunches and fed Amanda, and John took over Amanda's care once Barbara left for school. On 2 evenings, John finished work early and joined Barbara for dinner, appreciating her cooking skills. On another evening, he stayed home longer so Barbara could study for a test, then returned to the office and worked late. Their first weekend under the new arrangement also went well. Barbara watched Amanda while John worked on Saturday afternoon, and John spent Saturday evening with Amanda while Barbara went out with friends. On Sunday, John invited Fred and June over for dinner to discuss the past week. They agreed that everything had gone well and decided to make the arrangement permanent. Barbara's remaining clothes would be brought over during the week, and John would arrange temporary guardianship papers so he could handle any school or emergency situations. 2 bank accounts would be set up, one for Barbara's wages and another for her clothing, incidentals, and allowance, funded by her parents. Fred and June were excited to start traveling in their motorhome and planned to prepare it in the coming week. They also decided to buy a dolly to tow their car and aimed to leave in 2 weeks. The next 2 weeks passed quickly, with John and Barbara refining their routines. One emergency arose when a major client needed to meet with John unexpectedly. He asked his neighbor, Vicky Pierce, a 60-year-old widow, to babysit Amanda. Vicky enjoyed it and offered to help any time, which relieved John's worries. John's business continued steadily, and working evenings allowed him to avoid hiring another employee. Mary had become so capable that she rarely needed to call him at home. The pressure John had been feeling began to lift, and he started to enjoy life again. Since Amy's departure, John's emotional and physical desires had been suppressed. As the 1-month anniversary of her leaving approached, he found solace in memories of his first girlfriend from college. Though he still thought of Amy daily and fell asleep with her image in mind, he began accepting life without her. He also started reducing his nightly scotch habit, fearing it could become a problem. He knew he had too much to live for, especially Amanda. On Sunday, March 10th, June and Fred joined John, Barbara, and Amanda for dinner before their motorhome trip. After the meal, they relaxed in the living room, talking and watching Amanda play. June expressed her frustration that Amy hadn't called since leaving, and Fred added that he was also surprised. John admitted he didn't expect to hear from her, given the terms of their separation. During the conversation, John asked if Barbara had her driver's license, recalling seeing her drive. Fred confirmed she did but mentioned they were taking their car on the trip. John offered to insure Amy's car for Barbara to use for school and errands, which both Fred and Barbara appreciated. Barbara excitedly agreed, promising to drive carefully. As the evening wound down, Barbara put Amanda to bed and planned to study, while June and Fred prepared for their early departure. They said their goodbyes, promising to call regularly, and left, excited for their new adventure. John and Barbara waved them off from the front door. On Wednesday, March 27th, the past 2.5 weeks had flown by for John. He and Barbara had continued refining their responsibilities around the house. With Barbara now using the car, she handled most of the grocery shopping, usually on Saturdays while John cared for Amanda. That morning, Barbara slept in due to her morning classes being canceled for a teacher's meeting. She had asked John to get Amanda up, which was usually her task. After feeding Amanda, she began crying and looking around. John hoped Amanda would eventually stop missing her mother, but she continued to fuss. At that moment, Barbara came downstairs in her pajamas for breakfast, and Amanda immediately stopped crying when she saw her. Noticing this, John remarked, "Looks like she's missing you, not Amy. You better not move back home anytime soon," he joked. "Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere," Barbara replied with a smile as she picked up Amanda and went back upstairs. On Thursday, April 4th, around 10 a.m., John had just finished reading to Amanda, who was now scribbling with a crayon in her high chair, when the doorbell rang. He made sure Amanda was secure before answering. He found Lynn Cameron, a longtime friend of Amy's, at the door. "Hi, Lynn. Long time no see," John greeted her. "Hi, John. I thought I'd stop by for some coffee." "Your office said you work from home," Lynn replied. John invited her in, and they sat at the kitchen table with coffee. Lynn, as usual, looked stylish, wearing a tight white sweater that emphasized her curves. "So, Lynn, what's the real reason you're here?" John asked with a knowing smile. "I've been talking to Amy. She knows she can't contact you directly, but she asked me to check in. She's not trying to reopen old wounds. She just wants a few photos of Amanda," Lynn explained. "That's fine," John agreed. "I understand why she'd want photos, though it might upset her." Lynn took a few pictures of Amanda coloring and shared that she'd told Amy she was making a mistake by leaving. She even mentioned that if her ex had been like John, she would never have divorced him. "Thanks for the support," John said, reflecting on how difficult things had been. He explained that the early days were tough, but he'd hired a nanny for Amanda. Lynn was curious about the nanny, but before John could elaborate, her phone rang. She'd forgotten a hair appointment. Apologizing, she quickly took a few more photos, asking John to hold Amanda for some, then hurried out. As she left, she mentioned she'd let Amy know about the nanny and would stop by again for more photos if John was okay with it. On Wednesday, May 1st, Barbara's parents returned from their trip, and John and Barbara invited them over for dinner. They shared stories and photos of their travels, mentioning they met a couple with similar interests and planned to join them on another trip starting May 15th. Fred and June were excited about the upcoming journey. They were eager to hear how things had gone at home, and John reassured them that everything was going well. His business was busy, but he still had time to spend with Barbara and Amanda. Barbara was doing well in school, and Amanda was adjusting nicely even, taking her first steps and starting to say "dada" and "baba." Her grandparents were thrilled. Barbara then shared her own news. Her orthodontist told her the braces could come off in June, and she had decided to pursue a career in graphic design. Her parents encouraged her to keep an open mind until she finished high school, but they were supportive. John mentioned that his business might need a graphic designer in the future, and Barbara joked that she could work for him someday. Later, John informed them that Amy had sent Lynn to take photos of Amanda, which they agreed was likely for the best. They also noted that they still hadn't heard from Amy. The week had been routine until Wednesday, when John received a call from his lawyer, Bob Taylor. The divorce papers were finalized and would be official in 3 weeks. This news hit John hard, and instead of working, he spent the afternoon lying on his bed, thinking about Amy. The pain in his chest returned. Later, Lynn called to arrange another visit to take photos, but John asked her to wait until the following week, as he wasn't ready to deal with anything related to Amy. Monday, May 27th, marked the end of a tough month for John. The divorce was finalized the previous week, and he had received the documents confirming it. After a brief afternoon at work, John confided in Mary, who was concerned enough to call him at home later that evening. John retreated to his office with a scotch, trying to hide his emotions from Barbara. However, she found him crying and comforted him, reminding him that he still had her and Amanda. The next Monday brought more difficult news. Barbara returned home after stopping at her parents' house and found a message from Amy. She hesitantly told John that Amy had called to say she was marrying Peter Bridges on Saturday and that they were leaving for Paris on Sunday. John's reaction was immediate. He turned pale and tears filled his eyes. He whispered, "Oh God," as Barbara shared the news. He thanked her for being there for Amanda, knowing he wouldn't be good company that night, and decided to head to the office to process his emotions. After he left, Barbara quietly expressed her sympathy for John, wishing she could help him move on from Amy. Then she called her parents to give them the news. On Tuesday, June 11th, John waited for Barbara to return from her final orthodontist appointment, hoping that getting her braces off would help her become more confident and social. When she arrived, he smiled and said, "Let's see that big smile you've been hiding." Barbara flashed a smile, and John encouraged her to show it more often, telling her she was beautiful. Barbara, touched by his compliment, hugged and kissed him on the cheek, and John blushed in response. By Monday, July 1st, John's work had kept him busier, so he hadn't joined Barbara and Amanda for dinner as often. He decided to make the holiday weekend a family time. He spent Saturday doing chores and cooking, while encouraging Barbara to go out with her friends. That evening, John spent the night playing with Amanda, reading to her, and putting her to bed with lullabies. When Barbara returned at 11:30, they watched Saturday Night Live together, laughing and sharing jokes. On Sunday, they visited the local zoo with a friend of Barbara's, and John enjoyed watching the girls have fun while he pushed Amanda in her stroller. They had dinner at a family restaurant, and the girls helped keep Amanda entertained. On Monday, they enjoyed a picnic at the park, where Barbara brought another friend. While Amanda played, the two girls socialized with other friends. Later, they ate ice cream and enjoyed the fireworks. That night, after Amanda was asleep, Barbara thanked John for the great weekend, hugged him, and headed to bed, leaving John with a smile. A week later, June and Fred returned from their trip and spent many weekends and evenings visiting with John, Barbara, and Amanda. They shared stories and photos, enjoying family time together. John adjusted his work schedule to spend more evenings with Amanda and give Barbara time with her friends. Once a month, Lynn Cameron visited to take photos of Amanda, sending them to Amy in Paris. During one July visit, Lynn hinted at her interest in John, suggesting he could ask her out. John politely declined, saying he wasn't ready, but Lynn made it clear she wanted to be first in line when he was. In early August, John overheard Fred and June discussing what to get Barbara for her birthday on August 17th, realizing he needed to get her a gift as well. He began thinking about what to buy. On the morning of Barbara's birthday, Saturday, August 17th, John woke up early to prepare a special breakfast. When Barbara came downstairs, she was surprised to see a happy birthday, Barbara banner, a festive tablecloth, and candles on the table. "Good morning, birthday girl," John greeted her, serving her favorite blueberry pancakes, as her mother had mentioned.